Hello, everybody. Welcome to this Friday edition of Just the News, No Noise. I'm your host, Amanda Head. My co-host and Just the News editor-in-chief, John Solomon, is out on assignment tonight, but he'll be back on Monday. All right, as always, I'm reporting to you from Washington, D.C. and our wiretofishcoffee.com studios. It is the official coffee of Just the News, so head over to wiretofishcoffee.com and get 10% off, a 10% discount on all of their great coffee using the code JUSTNEWS at checkout. All right, President Trump made a lot of news earlier today after arriving in Bedminster, New Jersey. He's there attending a MAGA Inc. dinner this evening at the Trump National Golf Club. And he stopped and spoke to reporters outside of Air Force One, with one of the biggest talking points, of course, being Iran. Now, first, he answered some questions on talks with the Iranian regime, who have now stated that they won't speak to the United States until Israel stops striking military targets in their country. He answered that, as well as weighed in on the Iranians' conversation with European Union officials earlier today. Take a look.
Mr. President, the Iranian foreign minister this afternoon said if the U.S. is serious about negotiations, that you would call up Israel and request that they stop their airstrikes. Will you make that request?
Well, I think it's very hard to make that request right now. If somebody's winning, it's a little bit harder to do than if somebody's losing. But we're ready, willing, and able, and we've been speaking to Iran, and we'll see what happens.
Mr. President, what was the thought process behind the 2-week timetable?
Just time to see whether or not people come to their senses.
Mr. President, did the Europeans help at all in talking with the Iranians?
No, they didn't help. No. Iran doesn't want to speak to Europe. They want to speak to us. Europe is not going to be able to help in this.
And the president was also asked how the situation with Iraq differs to what we are seeing now in Iran when it comes to weapons of mass destruction, and how he could take such a strong stance against the Iraq war, but possibly weigh striking Iran now.
20 years ago, you were skeptical of a Republican administration that attacked a Middle East country on the idea of questionable intelligence of weapons of mass destruction. How is this moment different with Iran?
Well, there were no weapons of mass destruction. I never thought there were. And that was somewhat pre-nuclear. You know, there was a nuclear age, but nothing like it is today. And it looked like I'm right about the material that they've gathered already. It's a tremendous amount of material. And I think within a matter of weeks, or certainly within a matter of months, they're going to be able to have a nuclear weapon. We can't let that happen.
And I have just one more soundbite to play for you from President Trump earlier today, because a lot's been made over the president's director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, and the statements that she has made in the past regarding Iran and their nuclear program. President Trump said DNI Gabbard was wrong when she assessed that there was no evidence of Iran building nuclear weapons.
What intelligence do you have that Iran is building a nuclear weapon? Your intelligence community has said they have no evidence that they are at this point.
Well, then my intelligence community is wrong. Who in the intelligence community said that?
Your director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard.
She's wrong.
All right, so not only is there some significant division within the MAGA movement, but there's also some division within the administration as well. But before that gets overblown, let's be honest, there is division in every administration. It is also a very good thing that there are a range of perspectives on this and practically every other issue in this administration. It stops blind groupthink that can lead to some really bad decisions. So I, for one, don't really have much of a problem with it at all. But this conflict is a very hot button issue, and it seems to be striking at the heart of what it really means to be America first. So we're going to have a lot more discussion on this throughout the evening tonight. But before we get to that, we have been telling you all here at Just the News about how Christopher Wray's FBI received intelligence about an alleged plot that China was trying to rig the 2020 election for former President Joe Biden by creating hundreds of thousands of fake driver's licenses that could then be used to generate mail-in ballot votes for Joe Biden. Now, the FBI even disseminated that information to other intel agencies before ordering it to destroy it. So this, of course, has called into question former FBI Director Christopher Wray, saying during the 2020 election cycle that there was no evidence of foreign interference campaigns dealing with the election. And it seems that President Trump is not going to take this lying down, because he posted on Truth Social earlier today calling for a special prosecutor to investigate the 2020 election. He wrote this: Biden was grossly incompetent and the 2020 election was a total fraud. The evidence is massive and overwhelming. A special prosecutor must be appointed. This cannot be allowed to happen again in the United States of America. Let the work begin. So we here at Just the News, of course, will keep you updated as we learn more. And I will also add that that was a result of my co-host John Solomon's reporting just a few days ago. All right, time to turn to my very first guest of the evening. He is a member of the House Freedom Caucus, and he represents the great state of North Carolina very well, I might add. Congressman Mark Harris. Congressman, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, Amanda, it's great to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here on this Friday. And of course, the topic that has been on the front of everyone's minds this week is how or to what degree should we get involved in Israel's conflict with Iran? We've got this split in the base. It seems like a pretty formidable split. People feel very, very strongly on one side or the other. How do Republicans on Capitol Hill manage that schism without it being something that's detrimental to midterms?
Well, I think it's important to understand the situation as it's continued to develop. I mean, first of all, you've got Israel, who is our strongest ally right there in the Middle East, which we've got to find ourselves standing with them and helping them as they continue to protect themselves. And I've said from the beginning, since just a little over a week ago when they went into Iran with these initial strikes, that they really were doing a favor for the world. And I think people recognize that in those early days, that really taking out these nuclear facilities that are being used to prepare for a nuclear bomb, this is absolutely crucial, not only to Israel's interest, not only to America's interest, but to the world at large. And I think we owe Israel a debt of gratitude for their resolve and their strength that they've demonstrated over these days. Now, obviously, we don't want to see America getting into another conflict in the Middle East that seems to drag on and on and on. And I think President Trump is very, very sensitive to that. And I think that's the reason you're seeing the take that he has taken on this. He's getting all the facts. He's leaving room for negotiations. He has continued to tell Iran they need to come to the table again and again. And even now, he said that it would be within 2 weeks that he will make the decision to go or not. And so I think this is an important time. And I think the bulk of American people, and quite frankly, I think the bulk of MAGA is really standing with the president and trust him and understands the sensitivity with which he is approaching this very important issue.
Absolutely. And, I think the protracted nature of Iraq and Afghanistan, for my generation, my first election was George W. Bush. And for my generation, watching that play out for, pretty much all of our formidable, our growing up years, that is where that skepticism is coming from. But it seems to me, Congressman, that this would be much shorter. I mean, this would be a blip on the radar compared to what we saw in the Middle East from the 2000s up to a few years ago.
Well, I believe so, Amanda. I mean, I heard General Jack Keane say earlier today, in fact, that maybe it would be helpful if President Trump sent word directly to the Ayatollah that if he makes the decision that we're going to drop these bunker buster bombs that are necessary to make sure that they do not have a nuclear weapon. But the intention is that we will drop these bombs and then we'll get out. That's it. We don't intend to go any further at this point. But if Iran were to touch American interest or to go after any American soldiers, then at that point, all bets are off. And we would be willing to do whatever we have to do. I do think it's important that message be sent, because just stepping in to help Israel finish the job that they've already started is going to be crucial. We cannot have a nuclearized Iran. That's just a bottom line for the safety of the world.
Mm-hmm. And I want to ask you about something that President Trump said earlier today that we played in the intro to the show, when President Trump was talking about whether he would call Benjamin Netanyahu and say, hey, put a pause on this so that we can have these conversations with the Iranians. President Trump said, why would we do that right now? They're winning. That seems to make a lot of sense. I mean, coming from someone who is so pragmatic and from the business world, it really kind of shows that common sense mentality that he has, even with respect to what a lot of people consider to be complicated foreign policy.
It is very pragmatic. And I think it's very important, because he recognizes that Israel is trying to protect their national interests. They're trying to protect the safety of the world, ultimately, in taking out these nuclear facilities. And he's going to stand by Prime Minister Netanyahu and allow him to do what he's got to do. And America is going to do what they've got to do in this process.
Sir, President Trump is sitting at a pretty nice 53%. Thinking back on his first term, I'm not sure if in many of these polls he ever even broke 50%. But you've got the left messaging that, Trump can't make up his mind, and he promised no new wars, but now he's going to get us into another war, and, Trump is failing on immigration. Everybody hates what he's doing. And yet 53% is far ahead from where he was in his first term, and even ahead than where he was before the ICE deportations took place.
Well, I think it's clear that the American people are seeing something that we were missing for 4 consecutive years, and that was real leadership. I think what President Trump has brought to the White House is that real leadership. We've seen him make the decisions that he made there in L.A. to call in the National Guard. We've seen the decisions that he is on the precipice of making as he deals with this situation going on between Iran and Israel. He is able to bring leadership. Thoughtful leadership on top of that, I will say, that is trying to do what is best in fulfilling his responsibility as president of the United States. He is putting America first. I think the American citizens recognize that, and I think that's the reason you see his numbers where they are.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And I don't think it's just the American people who are siding with him, because a very liberal Ninth Circuit Court just ruled in his favor, saying, yes, indeed, as the president, he has the authority to deploy the National Guard. Do you anticipate that as we move through the summer, we all look back on the summer of love and remember how up in flames blue cities were in this country? Do you anticipate that we are going to have another Summer of Love 2.0?
Well, I don't think so. I think it's a different environment right now. I think that the president is in a place that is a good place. I think, again, as I stated a moment ago, people are recognizing his leadership. I really believe this whole law and order principle that he has continued to speak about and continue to lead out in is meaning an awful lot. And I think people are feeling it at the state.
Congressman, if you could just pause 1 second, I want to get back to that, but the vice president is coming out. Speaking of Los Angeles, he's right there, and then we're going to come back to you.
A lot of that during my tour here today, and the reason I'm here is I just wanted to hear from the law enforcement officials themselves, the state officials, the local officials, but also the federal officials, what's actually going on here on the ground. And I think there's some good news, and the good news is the rioting has gotten a lot better. But the bad news is, as I heard from everybody, unfortunately, the soldiers and Marines are still very much a necessary part of what's going on here, because they're worried that it's going to flare back up. And what do I mean when I say flare back up? I think it's useful to take stock of what actually happened in the city of Los Angeles over the past couple of months. So first of all, to set the table, we have a public official in Gavin Newsom and Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, who over the past few years have actively encouraged illegal migration into this community, have strained public services, have strained law enforcement, and really have offered generous benefits, not to American citizens, but to illegal immigrants to break the law, to come into our country, and to receive generous public assistance for having done so. What has that done? That has created an illegal immigration crisis, of course, facilitated by the policies of the Biden administration, and there is perhaps nowhere where that crisis has fallen harder than in the great city of Los Angeles. And, I landed, when I saw this city, when I was driving through to come to this FBI building, all I could think about is what a great American city Los Angeles is, and what a great tragedy it is that we have allowed illegal immigration and rioting to destroy, I think, one of the great gems of the American family. Now, these guys surrounding me represent the U.S. Attorney's Office, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. They represent immigration enforcement, and of course, we just met some Marines who represent the Department of Defense. All of these law enforcement officials were necessary because what happened is, in response to the basic federal action of enforcing immigration law, you had local officials and radical left-wing agitators who actually encouraged violence, who facilitated violence and rioting in the great city of Los Angeles. What happened here was a tragedy. You had people who were doing the simple job of enforcing the law, and they had rioters egged on by the governor and the mayor, making it harder for them to do their job. That is disgraceful. And it is why the president has responded so forcefully what happened in Los Angeles. Number one, because we've got to enforce our borders and get so many of these criminals out of our country to begin with. And number two, When you have violent agitators who make it impossible for the law enforcement to do their job, it is necessary to protect them and to defend them. We have to remember that the Friday that the riots started, before there was ever a single National Guardsman, before the President of the United States had sent in additional federal resources, you had law enforcement officers who were being captured and beaten by violent mobs egged on by Gavin Newsom and other officials. It was necessary to send the National Guard to stop that process, to bring some order back to this great city, and to make it possible for the people's president to enforce the people's immigration law. That's why we're here. That's why these guys are standing beside me. That's why we have close to 5,000 soldiers and Marines from the Department of Defense. It's because we've got to enforce the law. The president takes that very seriously. I'm happy to take a few questions, but before I do, I just want to send a message to all of the law enforcement, local, state, and federal, who frankly I think are suffering from a bit of a morale problem because they've had the local government in this community tell them that they're not allowed to do their job. I just want to let you know, from the president, the vice president on down, this administration stands with you. We're grateful for the job that you do every single day. We know that we wouldn't have a border were it not for your hard work and for your efforts, and we're going to keep on fighting for you and keep on standing with you every step of the way. I heard today Border Patrol officials tell me that they feel like the local government is sicking violent mobs on them when they go out to the community to enforce the nation's immigration laws. Can you imagine what it's like to be a federal official doing your job, doing the job the President of the United States ordered you to do, and have a mob come after you for following orders and for enforcing the American people's laws? I think it's disgraceful that we've ever gotten to this place in this country, but thank God we've got a president and an administration that is pushing back against lawlessness. We're going to keep on doing it every step of the way. So thank you to the Border Patrol, thank you to the soldiers and Marines, thank you to the U.S. attorneys, thank you to the FBI, thank you to all of you for doing what is necessary to enforce the laws of the American people. We are grateful to you, and we'll keep on fighting for you. Now I'll take a few questions.
President Vance, would you say that Gavin Newsom is endangering law enforcement here in California, and what should he be doing if he was protecting them?
Look, I would absolutely say that Gavin Newsom is endangering law enforcement. The law enforcement officials themselves tell me as much, that when they go out, let's say you have a Border Patrol official who needs to go out and arrest somebody, maybe a violent criminal who's also an illegal alien. When that Border Patrol agent goes out to do their job, they said within 15 minutes of them trying to do their job, they have protesters, sometimes violent protesters, who are in their face, obstructing them, preventing them from doing their job, and endangering their lives. Why do they have that? Because those people have been egged on by local officials. Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass, by treating this city as a sanctuary city, have basically said that it is open season on federal law enforcement. They have treated Border Patrol and border enforcement as somehow an illegitimate force instead of what they are, which is the American people's law enforcement trying to enforce the American people's laws. So when Gavin Newsom encourages violence and rioting, when he encourages people to get in the face of our great Border Patrol officers, he is absolutely endangering the lives of federal enforcement. He's absolutely endangering the lives of mothers and daughters and fathers and sons who have been sent here to do a simple thing: enforce the law. And thank God they're willing to do it, despite the fact that the local leadership of this community has made it harder on them and has in fact endangered their lives as they go about to do their important work.
Mr. President, your reaction to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, their decision yesterday, I just want to get your reaction to that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that for the past couple of weeks, Gavin Newsom has said that there's an illegitimate effort to send federal resources to secure a city that he refuses to secure. And what the Ninth Circuit said yesterday is that that was a completely legitimate and proper use of federal law enforcement. The president has a very simple proposal to everybody in every city, every community, every town, whether big or small. If you enforce your own laws and if you protect federal law enforcement, we're not going to send in the National Guard because it's unnecessary. But if you let violent rioters burn great American cities to the ground, then of course we're going to send federal law enforcement in to protect the people the president was elected to protect. And I think what the Ninth Circuit said very clearly is that when the president makes a determination that you've got to send in certain federal officials to protect people, that determination was legitimate, and the president's going to do it again if he has to. But hopefully it won't be necessary. We don't want to send these great Marines to cities like Los Angeles. We only do it if we have to protect federal property and to protect the lives of our great law enforcement folks.
Protesters, some of them funded by Democratic groups who were releasing the addresses of ICE agents in hotels around here.
Well, you know, it just drives home. I was actually shocked to hear this, and I didn't realize this until I was in the command center earlier talking to some of these great officials, that oftentimes you have far-left agitators who are posting the names, the addresses, even the family members of some of our law enforcement in an effort to harass them, antagonize them, and even threaten their lives. And what do I take from that? What I take from that is that you have a very small group of people who are so against the idea of border enforcement that they're willing to threaten and endanger the lives of their fellow Americans who are enforcing the law. And something else I take from it is that Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass have got to stop this craziness. Every single law enforcement officer I talked to today, every single one of them said they feel like the local leadership, the mayor and the governor, are encouraging these far-left agitators. What is the justification for this? What is the reason for this? There is a broad bipartisan consensus that we ought to have border enforcement and we ought to enforce our nation's laws. So why do you have far-left agitators egged on by local officials who are encouraging these agitators to harass and to threaten our Border Patrol? You have it because of a lack of common sense. These people need to be stopped. These people need to be told that if you threaten a law enforcement officer, you're going to go to prison for it. And that's exactly what the Trump administration, that's the message that we're sending. But look, we could do so much better, and we could have such an easier pathway for these federal law enforcement officers if the local leadership wasn't egging this on. And I think that's the great tragedy. What I see here today is the great tragedy when a mayor and a governor encourages their citizens to harass and endanger the lives of our police officers and our law enforcement officers. It's heartbreaking to see, and thank God we've got great people who are willing to persevere despite it.
Just another question, Mr. Vice President. There's been back and forth about whether raids will be going on in agricultural businesses and restaurants. Could you tell us if that's going to continue or not?
Well, the president's made 2 points on this that I think are very worth emphasizing. Number one, if you are in this country illegally, you are at threat of deportation, because that's what it means to enforce the country's laws. If you've come here illegally, the policy of the Trump administration is that you shouldn't be here. You should go back and then come through proper channels if you so desire. But the president has also said that he wants to focus our critical and short supply law enforcement resources on going after the really bad guys, on the violent criminals, on the rapists, on the drug cartel members. We've still got a lot of those people in our country, and that's where the president wants to focus law enforcement resources, and that's what he'll continue to do.
Democrat lawmakers who keep getting handcuffed. The New York Times just did a story. They keep getting handcuffed, suggesting that the Trump administration is cracking down on Democrats. Can you comment on that?
Well, I was hoping Jose Padilla would be here to ask a question, but unfortunately, I guess he decided not to show up because there wasn't the theater. And that's all it is. You know, I think everybody realizes that's what this is. It's pure political theater. These guys show up. They want to be captured on camera doing something. They want to be able to go back to their far left groups and to say, look, me, I stood up against border enforcement. I stood up against Donald Trump. When all they're really standing up for is for drug cartels to run rampant over our country and sex traffickers to be able to continue to traffic little kids into our country. That's what you're doing when you stand against border enforcement. So I think these guys, we ought to laugh them out of the building. We ought to call them out for doing what they're doing, which is grandstanding. And if they want to work seriously on border enforcement and on keeping their communities safe, the Trump administration's door is wide open. But they're not doing that. They'd love the grandstanding. They hate law enforcement because they hate the idea of the United States of America having a border. It's a disgrace, but it is what it is. We'll do one more question.
Sure. Just another thing. Do you think that the administration has been too aggressive with the deportation efforts? Like, are non-criminals getting caught up in the dragnet as well?
No, look, I don't think that we've been too aggressive at all. I mean, first of all, any time that a mistake has been made, we correct that mistake very quickly. But the unfortunate reality is that Joe Biden let in 15 to 20 million illegal aliens into this country, and there is no way for us to actually get those unlawful, illegal immigrants out of the United States of America without some serious law enforcement. And that's what we've been trying to do. It's not too aggressive. It's not not aggressive enough. It's just the right approach to make sure that we're enforcing our country's border laws. We have to remember, 100,000 Americans die of fentanyl overdoses brought in by the Mexican drug cartels. We've got a terrible sex and human trafficking problem because of what these cartels are doing at the southern border. The president deserves great credit because after 45 days, you saw illegal border crossings draw to a small fraction. Illegal border crossings down over 99% under President Trump's leadership. But unfortunately, because Joe Biden was president for 4 years, we've got a lot of bad people in the United States of America that we've got to do the job of getting out of our country. That's what these guys are doing. We ought to support them, and we ought to have local leadership that empowers them to do their job of making Americans safer. Instead, Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass, they've decided to go to war against the people trying to keep our communities safe. That's a disgrace. That's a terrible commentary on their qualities as leaders, but the Trump administration is going to keep on standing for the American citizens and for American law enforcement. Thank you all. Great to be here. And thank you to you guys. Yes, sir.
Up until February, when I moved to Washington, D.C., I had lived in Los Angeles for 19 years. So failed leadership, unfortunately, is the name of the game in Southern California and pretty much all across the Golden State. But we are going to take a very quick break, but we will be back on the other side.
Hey, folks, if you've been following the facts, not the spin, you know we're living through a pivotal moment in American history. In just the first 5 months of President Trump's return, we've seen measurable progress. Border security is tightening, deportations are up, woke and DEI policies are being dismantled, and our military is being restored to strength as a fighting machine. These are real actions, not talking points, but here's what the facts can also tell us. One man can't fix everything. Congress needs to get in line with the American people, and that's where you come in. Join AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens, at amac.us/justnews for as little as $12 a year. You'll get their award-winning magazine, valuable discounts, and access to free resources. But more importantly, you'll be part of a movement committed to protecting the values that made this country great: faith, family, and of course, freedom. Don't just read the headlines, help shape them. Join me and become an AMAC member today by going to amac.us/justnews and stand with millions of informed Americans right now. Owner like me, you need to listen to this. In today's AI and cyber world, scammers are stealing home titles and your equity is their target. Here's how it works. Criminals forge your signature on one document, use a fake notary stamp, pay a small fee with your county, and boom, just like that, your home title has been transferred out of your name. And that's when the problems begin, because they start taking out loans using your equity and even sell your property. And you're not even going to find out it's happened until you get a collection or foreclosure notice months later. That's a nightmare, right? So when's the last time you checked on your home title? Well, if you're like me, the answer is never, right? You need to do something about that right now. That's why I've partnered with Home Title Lock, so you can find out today if you're already a victim. Use my promo code JTN at HometitleLock.com, and you'll get a free title history report and a free trial of their $1 million triple lock protection. That's 24/7 monitoring of your title, urgent alerts to any changes that might happen, and if fraud does happen, they'll spend up to $1 million to fix it. That's a good deal. Find out why I trust Home Title Lock. Go to HometitleLock.com and use the promo code JTN. That's HometitleLock.com, promo code JTN. Hey, folks, if you've been following the facts, not the spin, you know we're living through a pivotal moment in American history. In just the first 5 months of President Trump's return, we've seen measurable progress. Border security is tightening, deportations are up, woke and DEI policies are being dismantled, and our military is being restored to strength as a fighting machine. These are real actions, not talking points, but here's what the facts can also tell us. One man can't fix everything. Congress needs to get in line with the American people, and that's where you come in. Join AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens, at amac.us/justnews for as little as $12 a year. You'll get their award-winning magazine, valuable discounts, and access to free resources. But more importantly, you'll be part of a movement committed to protecting the values that made this country great: faith, family, and of course, freedom. Don't just read the headlines, help shape them. Join me and become an AMAC member today by going to amac.us/justnews and stand with millions of informed Americans right now.
Welcome back to Just the News, No Noise. Last week, the Treasury Department announced sanctions against a faction of the Sinaloa drug cartel called Los Chapitos. As the name implies, it is run by family members of El Chapo. Now, it's a big deal because the Trump administration is taking the fight to these deadly Mexican drug cartels that are responsible for hundreds of thousands of American deaths. For example, Doug Quetz lost his son, Nicholas Quetz, a U.S. Marine Corps veteran, while he was traveling in Mexico. He was killed by the cartels. And joining us now to talk about this big step by the Trump administration and what else the United States can do to stop these cartels once and for all is Nicholas's father, Doug, who also is a retired U.S. Army officer, Doug Quetz. Doug, thanks so much for being here.
Hey, good afternoon. Thank you for taking a few minutes to speak with me about Nick's case.
Absolutely. You know, in instances like this, I always like to ask first, who was your son? What was he like?
So Nicholas was a 31-year-old Marine veteran. He had returned to Tucson after 4 honorable years of service. He was a Pima County employee. He did water reclamation projects for them. He was a best friend to many. He was an accomplished athlete and a great teammate in every sense of the word throughout high school, college, and then in the Marine Corps. He was the kind of first in, first out kid that we all seek to have, and that's what he was. He was an adventure lover, thrill seeker, and you know, the one thing we don't have in Arizona is proximity to the ocean. So our closest beach is actually in Mexico. So he was making a quick weekend trip down to go and get some water and dive time in.
That's just heartbreaking. So when you see what President Trump has done using some interesting agencies, quite frankly, to tamp down on what is happening south of our border, how significant of a step do you think that is?
I think it's a huge step. President Trump, since the day he heard about this, and President Trump became involved in my son's case just before the election, he vowed to help us, and he's done exactly what he said. You know, that trip starts with the inaugurational address himself when he addressed the issue. Shortly thereafter, the Secretary of State designated Sinaloa as well as 7 other groups as foreign terrorist organizations. That really opened up the aperture to do several other things. This group of sanctions that Secretary Bessent just announced a week and a half ago is actually the second round of those that he did. He did the first round on March 31st, which would have been Nick's 32nd birthday. In addition, we've had interaction with several other secretaries under President Trump, and we're actually out in participation of the Voice program with Secretary Kristi Noem. So his entire cabinet has been all in on this. You know, obviously there have been other movements through Department of Defense and other agencies that are tied to it, and tied to security in Mexico and the border. And the border problem is an extension of what happened at Nick, and the failed border policies really led to his downfall.
Sir, we have been dealing with the brutality of Mexican cartels coming into our country, infecting our country for the better part of half a century. And when you consider the brutality and the savagery with which they dealt with your son, I think at this point I'm surprised that they are just now, that it took President Trump coming into office to designate them a foreign terrorist organization, because as far as I'm concerned, whether it's Hezbollah, Hamas, Boko Haram, AQAP, whoever, they're all terrorists.
They are transnational terrorist organizations, right? I mean, we define them as any organization that uses violence to attain political means. And so some want to paint the cartels as not necessarily being that, but more like transnational criminal organizations, when in fact they're both. They permeated many levels of the government in Mexico, and they run with impunity there. And in fact, you know, we have cartel members that operate inside the United States across the border. So Homeland Security and tying that down has really made a huge difference. In Nick's case, it's 100% accurate in my mind to call it an assassination. Those groups, Nicholas came across a cartel roadblock in which they sought to steal his truck. That had happened several other times in close to the border, and Nick was only about an hour south of his home when this happened. And so when he saw it, Nick, as a trained U.S. Marine, recognized it for what it was an ambush. He tried to bypass it. About 11 vehicles and about 25 people chased him. They identified him as an American. I mean, there was a U.S. plate on the car. They actually forced his truck into a cement barrier, and then held him there for a few minutes, had some communications over phone with higher level up cartel members, and decided to shoot him. And so Nick was obviously unarmed going into Mexico, very strong gun laws. They shot him in the back as cowards, right? So that's about as great a definition of terrorist as you can do, identified against a known U.S. person. And I think President Trump's message becomes that targeting of U.S. citizens abroad or in the United States is not acceptable and is going to be dealt with all the instruments of national power. So he's brought the full force of the U.S. government against this and continues to work. And obviously, with other things he's got going on in the globe right now, this is one priority. It's not the only priority. But that message and tightening down the border is starting to permeate. And so we're seeing, when we had Memorial Day and we just had the Juneteenth holiday, there were no instances that I heard of any American being targeted, whereas before it was something that had happened routinely. And you may recall that when it's happened in the past, people have said, well, there's nothing that could be done. 6 months ago, when we had this change, it became obvious there were things that could be done, and we actually made those changes. So that's President Trump and his leadership in taking a proactive stance versus a passive stance. He and his national security team, and he's assembled a marvelous national security team to deal with this, and they're just going after it as hard as they can.
Absolutely. Sir, before I let you go, practically speaking, what does the damage look like from sanctions on Los Chapitos or any other faction? Because, we sanction Iran, and that is a sanction against their exports. That affects their oil, the wealth of that country because of their oil exports. When you're sanctioning a criminal cartel, practically speaking, how does that hurt them?
Well, remember, people think of the cartels as drug trafficking organizations, but they have their tentacles in just about everything. So the migrant crisis, from 2021 to 2024, they probably made more money off of transiting migrants and special interest aliens into the United States than they did from actually drug trafficking. Like I said, in the case of Nick, they were specifically going after his car or his truck. They've been involved in oil, they've been involved in money laundering. And so different from a state-owned enterprise, when you talk about cartels and those sanctions, even though they're a terrorist designated organization, think of them as an illicit trafficking organization. So you choke off their money. And what Secretary Bessent has done has forced them to, really change the ways they move money, made it much harder to do business inside the United States. And then the second and third order effects of this, of actually targeting them as terrorists, is once they start to make those movements of money, they get out of their protocols, they start to communicate in ways they ordinarily would not. They start to do things they wouldn't. That forces them to mistakes, and it actually brings them into other ways which they can be prosecuted as different kinds of targets. So that financial sanctioning and the designation of foreign terrorist organizations and designating them away, they open up so many other avenues they open up so many other methods that we can use inside the United States. And likewise, securing the border. When we close down that border and close down the migrants, virtually at 99.9%, I think it'd be the actual number, we close, then DHS and others can start looking at those drugs coming across the border, can start looking at money. That's why we start to see now, reduced numbers of fentanyl coming across for obvious reasons, because they're afraid they're going to be caught. And when they do try and traffic it, they will be caught. And then you start to look at the price of drugs inside the United States. And when that starts to go up, you've had an effect. And so we'll start to see that next. But that's kind of the link of it. But those Treasury sanctions, they may not be as satisfying to some because they're not necessarily kinetic direct action, but they're an important part of that kill chain, and they are having an effect.
Father of U.S. Marine Nicholas Quetz, Doug Quetz, thank you so much for being here, sir. We honor the legacy and the memory of your son.
Thank you, and thanks for helping get justice for Nicholas.
Absolutely, sir. All right, everybody, we've got to take a quick break, and we will be back on the other side. Welcome back to Just the News, No Noise. Just weeks after losing her husband, a Florida mother of 4 faced another nightmare, someone trying to steal her family home. Police say that 49-year-old Timothy Stark died in August of 2024, leaving behind his wife and young children. But by October, a man named Armando Porto del Sol allegedly filed paperwork claiming the $1 million property was his, even forging Stark's signature months after his death. So joining us now to discuss how to protect yourself and your family from going through that same situation is title theft education expert from Home Title Lock, Natalie Dominguez. Natalie, welcome back.
Hi, Amanda. Thanks so much for having me today.
Thank you for being here. Oh my gosh, the worst of the worst. The Bible literally talks about taking care of widows and orphans, and this guy did the opposite.
Absolutely. It's so sad when you think about families that are going through these types of things, especially a widow with 4 kids. She's in the middle of grieving her husband. You
Yeah.
think the last thing that she should have to worry about is, oh my gosh, is someone trying to take advantage of the death of my husband? And obviously us being preoccupied with everything that comes in the aftermath of that. But unfortunately, this is what we're seeing, right? Scammers are constantly trying to take advantage of the elderly because they are more vulnerable. And tragedies like this when people are not looking and they're preoccupied.
Sure. So this guy's 47 years old, the guy who committed the home title theft. He was charged, of course, with multiple felonies. How far did this get before law enforcement stepped in? I'm sure that this cost this poor widow a ton of money. How far down the road was it?
Yeah, so that's actually a great question. So the way that he was actually found out, and this is a scary thing for people that are watching that are not really keeping an eye on this, right? The way that they found out is that, once this paperwork gets filed at the county, it has to go through multiple steps, right? Once it's filed, at this point in this situation, it had gone to the Broward County Property Appraiser's office, excuse me, when they were notified of the ownership change, and it was someone on their team that had kind of looked at it and went, huh, this is kind of weird because we got this on this date, but this person is deceased. Like, how is this even possible? So, thank goodness in Florida, this specific county actually happened to have a task force. The reason why, sadly, is because Florida is a hotbed for this kind of activity. And they referred this document to the task force, but it wasn't until, I mean, we're in what, June now? It's hard to believe it's June. We're in June now. This happened last October. So the family didn't even know about it until way, way later, and it was because of one person that just happened to be paying attention. But the county in October took the document, no problems, no authentication, no nothing.
Yeah.
And then during the investigation, even the fake notary stamp that was used on the document, they went to the actual notary, and the notary was like, "We don't know this guy. We never stamped
Wow.
this. This wasn't us."
So is Florida a hotbed for this because there are a lot of retirees and seniors and, spouses losing their spouse, and so they're distracted? Is that why Florida is a hotbed?
Honestly, it wouldn't surprise me. I think that's a very astute observation. There are a lot of retirees. There are a lot more elderly, especially I know Broward County does have a good amount. Some areas in northern Florida are, a lot more susceptible as well. But we see it in just a lot of different places. California, New York, Florida, Tennessee, surprisingly, is a really big one, and Texas. So I think it happens to be just places with really, really high populations. When there's a lot more going on, I think it's a lot easier to kind of get away with these kinds of crimes because people aren't paying attention as much.
Yeah. So for our audience who is interested, how exactly does home title theft work?
Oh, absolutely. That's a great question. So for those of you that don't know or haven't seen me on the show before, how it works is a criminal or a scammer can get your information. They go to the county, they file a one-page document with a fake signature, fake notary stamp. You can get them online. You can get, photocopies of things on the web. In some counties and some municipalities, you can even file these documents online without having to do anything in person. They file this one-page document, and it essentially transfers the ownership of your home into someone else's name, a fake name or their name, the person that's doing this, and then they're able to use your ownership in their name on paper to go take out loans or even sell your property behind your back. Which actually happened to one of our restoration customers is also from Florida, and that was exactly what happened to him, and we had to help him through the entire aftermath of the process. So what we do at Home Title Lock is we have what's called triple lock protection, $1 million triple lock protection. It monitors your property 24/7. So it's almost like identity theft protection for your house, right? So it monitors your title 24/7. It notifies you of any changes, not just, oh, hey, we think this is suspicious. Even if it's you doing something, we notify you of everything. And then if fraud does occur, you have us and our $1 million guarantee to take you through that restoration process from beginning to end and make sure that you are not fighting this alone. Because in cases like this, where this person, thank goodness, there are some criminal charges being filed because some states don't have that. It doesn't take away what the family then has to do in the aftermath. It's a completely separate legal process. You don't just walk into the county and they tear it up and go, oh, this is fraud, cool. You still have to go to court. You still have to go through litigation.
Yeah, just a heartbreaking process if someone doesn't have something like home title lock. Natalie Dominguez, title theft education specialist for Home Title Lock. Thanks so much for being with us tonight. And remember, everybody, use our promo code JTN at HometitleLock.com, and you're going to get a free title history report and a free trial of their $1 million triple lock protection. That's what she was just talking about. So 24/7 monitoring of your title, urgent alerts to any changes, and if fraud does happen, they will spend up to $1 million to fix it. So go to HometitleLock.com and use the promo code JTN. That's HometitleLock.com, promo code JTN. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. Joining us now is a soldier who says that he got kicked out of the Army and labeled a white supremacist, as well as a Nazi sympathizer. How often are we hearing that these days? Nazi, Nazi, Nazi. His only true crime, he says, it was having a picture of President Trump on his phone. Private Piero Marinon Velasco, welcome to the show.
Hi, Amanda. Good to see you.
Piero, great to see you. Okay, so give everybody a little bit of your background. Tell everybody how all of this started all the way up until now.
I'm originally from Peru, moved to the United States legally. I'm now a United States citizen. Out of gratitude for so many things that I accomplished here. So far I enlisted in the Army on July 2023 without knowing what was going to happen to me, just for being a conservative. I went to Fort Jackson July 10th, 2023. And then during reception process, I filed an EO complaint against a civilian Black nurse who stated that white girls let anybody in their beds when they're drunk. I believe that what happened to me after it was some sort of retaliation. Then I got transferred to my basic training unit, where I met my senior drill instructor, who was a Hispanic female from LA. She asked us to write in a piece of paper why was the reason why we joined the Army. I said anything. I didn't say anything different than what I already stated, out of gratitude for this country and because I love this nation. So apparently things changed after this, because she started to refer to me as the mother F and thinks she knows it all. After that, her demeanor changed, and the day of my graduation, I was called to my company commander's office. An infantry officer who at the beginning of basic training gave us a speech on gender diversity, asking us how many genders were. So he told me that I was being part of an investigation for violating DEI policies and equal opportunity as well policies. After that, I stayed in Fort Jackson for 5 months under unlawful confinement until I was discharged in March 2024.
Unbelievable. So the issues began basically since the beginning. What's amazing to me is that you're from Peru. You and I do not have the same amount of melanin in our skin, and you're a white supremacist. That's pretty creative.
I mean, I thought it was a joke when he asked me, because his first question was, "Excuse me, Trainee, have you ever read Mein Kampf?" You know, it was the same question that was asked to President Trump, and I was like, "Here we go." I thought it was a prank, but then I knew he was being serious. No, it was heartbreaking.
Well, Pierre, I think we lost your signal. If you can hear me, I want to go back to the point where we were talking about your cell phone and having a picture of President Trump on there. And for my audience to know, full disclosure, I had Piero on my podcast. And this started with him actually stopping me outside of the White House. This was probably 2 weeks ago. I was walking out of the press gate, and Piero saw me and stopped me and told me very briefly his story. And then I actually remembered this. I felt like I had remembered this from somewhere, and I believe it was from Congressman Eli Crane. Piero, do we have you back?
Can you hear me now, Amanda?
Yes. Okay, so I remember you telling me on the podcast how the whole phone fiasco happened. Tell everybody about that.
On Sundays, we're allowed to use our phones in order to contact our families. So it's in the afternoon and it's for a period of an hour, 30 minutes, depending how we did during the week. Then our drill sergeants let us use our phones to talk to our families. So we don't waste time, for us not to waste time charging our phones because there are a limited amount of outlets in the company. The females that, or the people that are staying in the company that are not attending to religious services, they're in charge of charging our phones. When I came back from church that afternoon, probably the very beginning, the first week or two of basic training, I was approached by a Black female who asked me straightforward, "Why are you racist?" And I didn't understand the question because it was a question that was carrying an answer as well. Instead of, "Are you racist?" she asked me straightforward, "Why are you racist?" And I was like, "Well, why are you asking me that?" "Well, is this your phone?" And I was like, "Yes, it is." "Why do you have a picture of President Trump there?" So, "Well, I just like him, I just like the picture." As you can see, there is nothing obscene or nudity. It's just a regular portrait from his previous administration. So this, I believe this was reported to this senior drill sergeant. And then after this, every time I was around, she was making comments like, "I am so proud to be from California. Just FYI, my favorite color is blue." Then this was the same senior drill sergeant, Hispanic, who took me to the company commander's office, the one who gave us a briefing on gender diversity at the beginning of the basic training, and informed me that I was being part of this investigation.
So they're asserting that you are a white supremacist, which is essentially saying that you are racist. It sounds like they are.
I can't believe they literally used against me the system that the Democrats created to protect people like me. I hate that they call me an oppressed minority because, first of all, I'm not oppressed at all. I'm free as it comes. This is the land of freedom for a reason. And I came here for a reason. So it doesn't make any sense. They call me a white supremacist when I'm obviously not white. I think what made it worse and bad for me is the fact that I'm actually married to a white woman. But that was a problem. They weaponized the system against me that they create. It didn't make any sense to me at all.
Yeah. Piero, I want to make sure that people can support you. They can raise what on social media for your story, because I think it's important that you get justice for this. Tell everybody where they can find you on social media.
Please find me on Instagram as The Real PBT. And if the president is watching this or somebody can take this message to him, please give me some justice. Don't make me lose my faith in this country, sir.
Yeah, Piero Marinon Velasco. First of all, thank you for being here, but also thank you for stopping me outside of the White House a few weeks ago, because I wouldn't have wanted to miss this story and amplifying it.